Okay. Hi, I'm Jessica.
Hello, I'm Stephanie.
We are both at the University of Washington, and we collaborate on a project about leading towards anti-racist, ambitious mathematics instruction. A few years ago, I was sitting in a group of teachers working on improving ambitious mathematics, or mathematics that's focused on concepts rather than just fluency. We were choosing a task to bring to a group of kids, and one of the teachers said, "My students are really sweet, but this task is too hard." It was at that moment that we realized we needed to move from our race neutral implicit theory of action, that if we helped teachers pay attention to students' thinking, they'd realize that all students can think. And we needed to be really explicit around how to lead towards anti-racist mathematics. So we have been working on transforming racialized beliefs around who can do mathematics. And through our deep dive into what counts as anti-racist mathematics and what counts as anti-racist leadership, we realized that we not only need to focus on the beliefs around who can do mathematics, but also fundamentally what counts as mathematics. And we'll talk more about that as we go today. Here are 4 dimensions of from the anti-racist mathematics literature that we talk about. Really, this is what anti-racist mathematics teaching and learning looks like. We're not going to go over it. We'd like you to pause the video and look over these core dimensions as we, and then continue on.
So Jessica mentioned that we are starting with a foundation of understanding from literature what anti-racist mathematics teaching and learning looks like. And we have taken that foundation along with the literature about anti-racist leadership and have built a framework to try to help us describe what leadership for anti-racist mathematics teaching and learning might look like. So what's the role of leaders in supporting that work? So again, feel free to pause the video and take a look. We've included the website so that you can look at the dimensions and the subdimensions in more detail. But this is a framework that's very much in progress. It's built from a synthesis of literature, but then also our work with practitioners and our own empirical research. And it's meant to be detailed enough to give leaders and researchers an idea of what these practices look like, but also flexible enough to allow for context and for the local differences that we know are really critical. So it's meant to be precise without being prescriptive. So take a look on your own time. We thought it would be useful to move forward and think about what this actually looks like in practice. So we're going to talk through a vignette that comes from our work with practitioners and our data collection for our research to kind of show you how this framework plays out in practice. So take a minute to read through this scenario that we'll present here. It's taken from a 3rd grade team from a school that we've been working with around trying to understand what anti-racist mathematics looks like and to support teachers to do that work. So take a pause now and read through the vignette on your own. Okay, so now that you've had a chance to read through the vignette, let's break it up and think about what we can learn or what this really shows when we use the framework as a lens. So when we think about that opportunity, we see it as demonstrating the real need for leadership in this area and also a real opportunity for leaders to make a big impact. And the first area would be around in their own framing of what mathematics is and how the connection between mathematics and racial equity plays out in the classroom. So for example, when we think about how leaders might frame a vision for what anti-racist mathematics is, we see here an opportunity for leaders to really refocus teachers around what good mathematics is and to really assert that it has to be built on knowledge of the particular students and the communities that they're serving in the classroom. So this is a moment when leaders might point out all of the ways that that parents are already using mathematics in really rich ways. With they're using multiplication strategies, maybe that might not look like the mathematics strategies that teachers are used to, but that are valid and interesting. They might be able to point out they might be able to create sort of counter narratives about families as math doers and math knowers by turning teachers' attention to the different ways that they're using multiplication strategies in unexpected and sort of everyday cultural ways. This might also be an opportunity for them to think about how the experiences that the families have had as learners of mathematics are really racialized, and how they are part of a larger system where culture and mathematics and race and learning are kind of coming together in interesting ways. And so it's an opportunity for them to raise questions about how parents may or may not see themselves as math people, and how their experiences in schooling may have contributed to that, and how we can build in instructional moments for kids to be able to explore that and to even challenge that.
Great. So if framing is how the leaders are talking about anti-racist mathematics and the teaching and learning around that, building capacity are the actions that they're doing to engender that to happen. So we're gonna again give an example of how leaders might build capacity for the 3rd grade multiplication unit. And there are 3 main ways that we're talking about it here. One is around redistributing resources in ways that decenter whiteness and promote racial equity in classrooms. And here we're saying that before the unit, the leaders did this. They provided time for teachers to collaborate around the curriculum and the community's funds of knowledge. And by encouraging students to conduct the interviews in their home language, teachers signaled that they valued the students' language. And so in short, the teachers were primed for authentic engagement with the family's funds of knowledge as a foundation of their multiplication unit. So clearly the leadership had already done the work of the first work of redistributing resources. Secondly, the leaders can work towards leading teachers toward anti-racist mathematics instruction and explicitly engage with non-dominant communities. Well, what would that look like? The leaders might support the teachers to think about how students could make a list of all of the contexts that came up in the interviews across the classrooms, and then design follow-up questions to have families elaborate on the uses of multiplication. The information could also feed into the design of the unit and provide context for making sense of the meanings and uses of multiplication. And speed, accuracy, and quantity of mathematics content has often fed into racialized hierarchy of success, where the elaboration of meaningful uses of mathematics in cultural, home, and workplaces can disrupt those ideas about what counts as mathematics. Finally, leaders can use resources and political capital. So they could develop a teacher and family math planning group through which families are positioned as knowers and doers of mathematics essential to school learning. By doing that, the resources they're going to have to use, like for parents, they're going to need to ensure that the meeting space and time is accessible to all of the parents, that there's childcare provided, that there are translators if they're needed, and that parents are compensated for their time. And for resources for the teachers will also need to be compensated if they're doing this time outside of their contracted time for school. In terms of political capital, really leaders need to work on building trust with parents who may previously have not had positive interactions with school. Those are some examples of what leadership practices and leadership moves might look like when they're building capacity for the teachers. I'm also going to talk through the 3rd dimension of evidence of and for transformation. And I'm doing all the computer things. So we have 3 ideas here around what they could do to see evidence of and for transformation, so that they're able to reflect on what they're doing and make changes as they are iterating on the work. So for evidence of leaders and teachers learning, they could engage in a reflective writing and discussion after the unit. So they might ask teachers in a PLC or in a professional learning session, on their Wednesday afternoons, to write a reflection. Before I did this unit, I thought blank, and now I realize blank, and I have learned blank about my students and their families' mathematics knowing and doing. And then they could facilitate a discussion about their own and their teachers' learning and how it connects to their community languages, political and historical context. And it's important here that the leaders also position themselves as learners in this context, acknowledging and modeling that this process is lifelong. To look for evidence of increased knowledge of the family and the community, they could use a version of the initial assessment tool that I think I actually have the book right here. I do, that comes from Andy Schmaro's book. Just Schools is at the end. And this tool asks both schools and school staff and families to assess dimensions of partnership by placing dots on a continuum from conventional to equitable partnerships. So in this context, the dimensions might include my family's way of knowing and doing mathematics is valued and included in my students' classroom. And my students' learning focuses on them as people and thinkers. So we can think about what those dimensions might be, and they would be different depending on what the context is for the initial assessment tool. And finally, leaders can look for evidence of both organizational and student learning by collaborating with the teacher family group that we talked about before to design a student survey or a focus group. Really ask students and families what they liked about sharing about their multiplication stories, getting input for future units, and asking if the parents and students are interested in collaborating on a future unit with teachers. So again, these are all ideas that are based from both sets of literatures, as well as our empirical work with school leaders and district leaders with our partners. But they are imagined, right? Most of them are imagined. Some of them are based on real life events. But we are still asking questions. And so we, in collaboration with our school and district leaders, we are really wondering, like, how does this framework support leadership? These are some of the questions that we're asking, like, do leaders feel more confident and strategic in their leadership moves towards anti-racist, ambitious mathematics? Because the leadership moves, the anti-racist leadership moves are often new for our leaders, as are moves towards ambitious mathematics. So learning how to do those together and learning how to lead for it is hard. And our leaders are becoming more and more confident, and we're wondering about how the framework could support that. Second is, do teachers' anti-racist and ambitious instructional practices improve? So when we go into classrooms, are we seeing changes in how and improvements in how teachers are instructing? And how does the change in leadership and instruction shape students' experiences in learning mathematics? So do students feel differently about learning mathematics than they used to? And that is our time. This is our contact information. There's another link to the framework itself, and then also a link to our website that has more information about this work more generally. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.